Good afternoon and good morning for everybody connected outside of Europe. Andrea Rossi here, and thank you for attending this webinar, which speaks about how identity governance is evolving using behavioral techniques. We are Sherlock, a company that does by mission identity behavioral insights for a simpler identity management. And that's the topic of today. Before we get started, I kindly ask you to confirm that you can hear me properly and you can see the screen properly. You can use the chat box, which is part of the Zoom tooling. So thank you very much. Good. So the session is going to be quite interactive, and it's going to be a few charts we're going to visualize all the things that we are saying in a very quick demo. So let's get it started. So what we are seeing now in the market, and I thank ForgeRock and Google Cloud for this nice reporting built by Forrester, is that there are two priorities coming in the following years. So one is about understanding more in terms of insights about identity analytics. And the other one is understanding more user behavioral profiles. So something which is not just biometrics, but also, as I said, behavioral profiles. So that's very interesting because it's essentially what we do. We provide a lot of insights based on behavioral evidences. Now let's take a look at the scenario inside any given company. So any company of any size, they're basically running on three technology pillars. One being the perimeter security stuff, the firewall sitting in that space. All the infrastructure platforms, VPN, directories are included into that bucket. And then finally, the business world that spans from Exchange, Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, and so forth. So if we look at what originally, or even today, the IAM or IGA platform are doing, it's basically enforcing controls. So provisioning users in the way they should be. But they detect any ability, they lack any ability to detect actual behaviors. If we move on the left side of the spectrum, we see that the CM platforms, which are built originally for storing a bunch of data, I would say any log, are mainly connected to perimeter security technologies. They might occasionally connect also to the business world, but mainly they are collecting tons of any data, any log data out of these type of infrastructure, and they lack any ability to understand identity. In fact, they lack what we say an identity data model. So this is exactly where we at Sherlock are positioned. So we mainly read activity log out of identity-rich applications, or simply said, any application that has an account ID as part of the log file. And we don't read the data for the sake of storing, but we read data for the sake of finding and storing behavioral baselines. So in a nutshell, what we are designed to do, it's really to provide behavioral signals back to identity management people in order to detect or help them detect in a better way insider threats and to provide recommendation. And this is a bit of the challenge that we are facing in the market today. Security works in isolation, while a lot of the threats are starting from behavioral anomalies that any business manager could easily define as risky or not risky if taken early on. So our bet is that security needs to be socialized, and all this socialization has to come from understanding behavioral anomalies and to funnel that back into the business users of the current identity management platform. Now, if you look at who we are as Sherlock, it's a young company founded or started in 2017, but 70% of us, including myself, are coming from many years of identity management, and most of us came from a company called Cross Ideas that we sold to IBM. So in a way, Sherlock, with the addition of machine learning engineers, it's the continuation of a journey that is aiming to improve, on the same original mission. So better control people and what they do in the application estate. So, and that's why we say our mission is really to provide best-in-class identity-centric behavioral, and that's a key word, platform. You can see on the right, it's our patent. We have obtained our first patent in June last year. And this is not a patent on a given machine learning model that we use as a foundational component. It's really based on the baseline behavioral architecture that we have built, which is quite unique. And we're going to touch about it today, especially when we get into the demo. Now, what we do at Sherlock, it's fairly simple to describe. We collect a bunch of user activity log. They could come from email system, they could come from Zoom collaboration system, they could come from SAP, Salesforce, VPN. And in a nutshell, what we do with this collection is to find baseline and detect behavioral anomalies at the individual level. What we mean by individual, it's human individual, which is the main topic of today's conversation, but also machine anomaly, okay? This is not covered during today's presentation, but in general, for us, there are the two types of identity, a human one and machine one. We are symbiotically connected to any existing identity management platform for two reasons. We take and we give back. What we take, it's all the reconciliation of identities, accounts, this taxonomy, it's oftentimes well described in these platforms, and that's the taking part. The giving back part, it's basically alerts and recommendation that are sitting in two domains. And as I said, we just don't operate in providing security-related threats or security-related signals that are sitting mainly in the cyber threat prevention, but we also provide signals that are sitting in what we call IAM optimization. And let me get into a very simple example on what a day in the life of a line manager looks like when using Sherlock signal generation machine. So this is an email that this is coming out of our One Identity integration, signaling data back to One Identity. But this is a generic template that applies to anybody. So the line manager one day gets an email and says, well, we need your attention because there is a potential threat or a security situation that in this case, it's classified as data exfiltration. And the reason is because the system has detected some anomalous activity compared to this gentleman's boss, this Christian Bengtsson. So we asked the line manager to have a look. And the line manager can, with a 5-minute interview, or maybe without having an interview with one of his reports, understand whether that's a real case or not. And in general, we say, for now, we have suspended the accounts for this Mr. Christian Bengtsson because it's safer to do that while you perform your evaluation. So this is the immediate impersonification of how we can help the line manager, the identity management folks to be part of a security mitigation process in a language that they can understand. On the other side, that's the other type of signal. There are less risky or less urgent situations, and these are dealing with recommendation. And this specific case, there is nothing to be to rush to. We say, dear manager, we have a recommendation. According to our insights, one of your teammates is not using Salesforce for quite a long time. But most of his peers, and what we mean by peers are his peers according to, for example, the group or the organizational unit they commonly belong to, they are using it. So he's not using. So in theory, he should have a need for that, but in practice, he's not using it. So maybe you can save some money stopping some Salesforce subscription. So two exemplification or two impersonification in the eyes of a line manager of the type of signals we can provide. Now, how do we achieve that very simple goal? So let's start first from what we have built in terms of what we call a reference model. So if you look into any company, again, these are the four macro domains of I would say data, but you know, the four main environments. So you have a data domain, and here you can have all the SharePoint, the Box, the Microsoft Drive, the Jira type of applications behind it. You have the collaboration space, email, conference calling, sort of one-to-many collaboration. You have the access control type of environment, the Okta, the VPNs are sitting here, and then you have the business application side of the equation, SAP, Dynamics, Salesforce. For each of these environments, we have built a common indicator of behaviors. So each of these environments are interested in detecting some unusual changes of behavior at the user level. One example, on the data level, it's very common need to understand unusual activity on data download, or unusual activity on certain risky folders. If you move into the email, it's relevant to know if there has been an unusual attachment size to email or an unusual amount of emails sent for each given individual to outbound email addresses. When it comes to access control, for example, it's interesting to know anomalies in failed logins, because here the rule that says anything above 2 failed logins is an issue, well, it's a generic, not specific rule. For me, one failed login daily, it's my normal. For some other guys, failing the login once per month, it's too much. So here, it has to be anomalous behavior at the user level. And last but not least, the business application side. Here we have other type of anomalies that are interesting, and especially in the business world. I take SAP as an example. The sequence of transactions or T codes that each user is commonly performing, it's a habit. So if that sequence changes, that's a change of habit. It's an anomalous event. So again, very specific to these words. So with all this, these indicators of behaviors are signaling anomalies. And these anomalies are not risky per se. They need to be filtered down to remove the bunch of, I wouldn't say false positives, but filter when too many anomalies are becoming risky. And so in the middle of the entire reference model, there is on the right side ways or threat models to filter down the real risk of insider threats. And on the left side, on the IAM optimization, it's filtering down anomalies in order, for example, to provide recommendations that are down to review access for that user. Maybe we suggest you remove access for that user and so forth, or even working and understanding the ghost accounts. So accounts that are active in the log file, but not accounted in any form into the IGA platform. Now you might say, nice, we'll see this in action, but how have you built it? So all this reference model has been built over our foundational component, which we call the indicator of behavior, which is a very generic ingredient of the puzzle that can allow us to build IOBs, indicator of behaviors, on using a triplet of information. So basically you pick a given log file, could be SAP, could be Exchange, could be a custom application. You pick a log field, you want to monitor behaviors for any given user, and you pick a machine learning model. And basically for that IOB, you can find for each user within the given company, say 20,000 people, 20,000 at least baselines. And then out of that baseline, you can understand the anomaly. So here, the whole principle, it's mimicking what Agatha Christie used to say, that you need more than one coincidence to build a proof. So here, instead of maniacally focus on finding the super accurate machine learning model that works for a given data set, like the SAP, we decided to build a model that generically can scale to provide a lot of signals. Now the thing is, how do you filter down that signal to real threats? And before getting to that, I want to give you a bit of insights on our machine learning models, because there is a lot of, as the Americans say, fluffy bunny on the machine learning side. And we took a very conscious decision from the very beginning to build models that are unsupervised or unattended. In other words, you don't have to massage the data set, the learning data set that we ingest in order to learn the baselines. So no need to say, what's good and what bad, sort of pre-massaged education data set. So it's unsupervised. And we have built, at the moment, 5, but they are increasing, common machine learning models that are understanding anomalies for different use cases. A very simple to understand, it's the anomalous working hours, and you will see that in action. The anomalous patterns, it's the one that detects whether a given user has changed habits of launching SAP transactions or any sort of, pattern-based type of users of any application. Anomalous frequency is, for example, used for understanding how much you have been increased your usage of a given transaction or access to a given folder, and so forth. Okay, this is going to be visualized during the demo. The decision not to use out-of-the-box machine learning models, but to build our own, it's not based on an eccentric desire to be unique and cool. It's because if you want to be precise, so accurate, reduce at max the false positives, you need to be able to control all the little triggers and adjustments within any given algorithm. And that's not really possible when you use out-of-the-shelf stuff that could be provided by the likes of AWS or Azure, what we call the out-of-the-box machine learning models. Now, we were saying, how do you filter out a bunch of anomalies into, the good things to focus on? You will see in the demo, we have a threat model. We have pre-built a number of pre-canned threats model, but essentially it's a staging process where the different anomalies are classified into different stages of severity. And we deliberately avoided to stage the threat into the MITRE kill chain, because that's too security and that's too much, I would say, perimeter security. This is really a world of insider threat. So we went for a different jargon, which is the inflammation metaphor. So redness, increased heat, swelling, that's well-known academic information, exactly in the direction of an inflamed body, and we treat the insider threat within a company with the same metaphor. All right, now let me stop for a second here because we get into the live environment and then we'll get back for closing time. So now I need to stop my sharing here and share a different screen. All right. Are you seeing my screen that says dashboard and Sherlock? Just any one of you connected could just, good. So the chat is here. Phenomenal. Thank you very much. All right, here's the dashboard. So first of all, who's really accessing this very powerful environment? Not too many people. Okay, most of the signals are consumed elsewhere, like within an identity governance platform. This is really a place for power user. Could be the CISO, could be the head of identity management, could be HR. But few people, not many. But it's important to understand the behind the scenes of what we can generate as a signal. So you get into this platform and you understand that today there are 6 threats. out of which there are 2 related to what we call data sabotage and 4 others in different type of threats. We also have an immediate understanding of the user and account population, and we can see even, now we want to have a look at the risky ones, okay? Those with alerts or threats linked to them. But you can have a view also on other stuff like unused accounts or ghost accounts. So there is an entire world that provides insight to identity management optimization beside the security aspects that we are talking about now. Now let's move down to the bottom, and it's very important to understand who are these guys, who are these identities, and our mantra, it's really to provide a face to the eyes, okay? We really want to know, we're not interested on the account per se, on which application, we really want to know who's the guy or the lady behind it. So this Bobby Ellingham has 2 alerts. So one is insider threat data, I think it's data sabotage, and the other one is compromised account. So it looks that this guy is deleting a lot of file, but could also be that his account has been compromised. So let's have a look here and click on Bobby. Now, when you get into the individual guy, you can have a lot of, I call it observation techniques. You can have a look at his account utilization in different applications. It's also very interesting to know what the guy has been doing in any given moment of the day. This time of the day he was working on Gmail and accessing G Drive. But the meaty part, it's really here on what we call the user active threats. And now we are starting to get into the visualization of what you guys have seen so far in few charts. So let's click on this one and let's take a look at this threat severity staging process. So as I said before, this threat severity is staged into 6 levels or 6 gates. The more you move to the right, to the loss of function, well, actually, if some anomalies is starting to kick in there, means that you're late. So we all think it's key to detect the weak signals early on, because I totally believe that a lot of even of the ransomware attacks could be easily spotted because there were some weak signals linked to some sudden change of behaviors or some users or some accounts. So in this specific case, this Bobby guy, well, he went through, he kicked in the redness stage because he had too many failed logins, but say that the company didn't pay attention too much. Then he went to increased it because he did some unusual access to some folders and he did some anomalous working hours on SAP. But then it's really getting to the light pane and we need to take a look at it because it's starting to get serious. So here in the threat model, we said that you get into this stage for a compromised account threat if you access new access, you as a user never did it in the past, to some selected risky folders, which are basically tagged folders. If you are starting new transactions on SAP, where new means something that you have not done in the past, and then anomalous working hours. Let's start to take a look at what these anomalies look like, because that's also the visually nice looking part. So let's go here. I would say the coolest or the nicest indicator of behavior or behavioral anomaly, it's what we call the one related to anomalous working hours. So basically the system detected something on Monday, 15th of March. So let me explain this curve. The blue part is the standard behavior over the observation period for this guy. Specifically, this has been built over a 6-month learning period. Could be 9, could be 12, but that's the blue part. That given day, that guy on 15th of March, he worked on SAP basically outside of his standard habits. You see the gray part. The red line, it's our anomaly score. So the bigger, the more the behavior is anomalous. So this is one indicator, a very high change of behavior when it comes to working habits. But it wasn't the only one. In the same stage, we wanted to detect also, for example, new access to very risky folders. So say that the company has tagged that there are some folders within the enterprise document management system, some folders that are very critical. So this guy never accessed prior to that, this given folder. And on that day, as you can see, it's not the same day, it was the following day, he has accessed one of the risky folders 22 times. So we also said we want to filter out really the dangerous stuff. So as part of the threat model, another indicator was built for detecting, similar to risky folders, the fact that he was launching transactions that he never did before during his last 6 to 8 months. So these are all real data coming out of real systems. So you can see yourself that these are all very cryptic T codes out of SAP. So in a nutshell, what you can do here is investigate, even download a portion of the log file, but it's all about filtering down many anomalies and having a given stage trigger. Basically, we say there are too many anomalies, and anytime there are too many anomalies of type 1, 2, and 3, then we want an alert, okay? So this is the way you are observing a given anomaly or a given threat to a given user. But now your question could be, can we go a bit behind the scene and see how you model that stuff? Because this is nothing else than a modeling out of our engine. So let's move into the setting piece. We have a thing called Threat Modeler. And here you can do two things. You can build indicator of behaviors, which are the basic ingredients of signal generation. And we have basically modeled a number of indicator of behaviors. And let me look at, for example, this one. This one is for detecting new GDPR relevant transaction. It's nothing else that an indicator built on a given log file, the SAP, using an algorithm. It's the one that says, I want to detect novelty. So new things that are happening in that specific field. The field was the transaction, the T code for SAP, and we are filtering or focusing on given attribute of that log field. In this specific case, T codes of transactions. And we say that indicator has to build a baseline over a given time frame, and then any change of behavior is compared to that learning time frame. So any indicator is built like that. You pick the, if you look at this one, the one on another type of data, it's the data are from G Drive. The algorithm is anomalous working hours. So it's the same principle. And you have a different log file and you want to build your own, no problem. You build the new indicator, which is all about connecting through our collectors, less than 1 hour, to a custom built application. You pick the algorithm, you pick the fields, you pick the filters, the learning time, and here you go. So you build an IOB, indicator of behavior, to a custom application in less than 1 hour. So for those of you identity management folks, building the connectivity to a given application, it's a matter of 1 hour. It's not a matter of days, as in the old identity management space. But again, these indicators are just signals. You need to filter them down. And then we have the threat part. Threat, as I said, it's just a staged way to filter all these anomalies and to really trigger an alert when it makes sense. So you can see here, all the stages have indicators. They can be treated in and or. It's your decision. And you want to get the first level trapping more anomalies from the very early beginning. You just pick one of the indicators that you built and you put them into the threat model, and they start detecting anomalies earlier on or later on. So this is by definition super simple, and it's been designed for clients and partners to be self-sufficient on that. One important concept, it's the correlation time window. When it comes to insider threat, it's not about detecting things that are happening today at the second, okay? This is more the world of cyber perimeter stuff. In the world of insider threat, these anomalies are happening over a period of time. So one day you run a Perl illustration, the second day you start understanding what type of data you might obtain using some transactions, and then you start doing anomalous things over a period of time. So it's very important to be able to define what we call the correlation time window, and every threat has its own window. You don't like 7, you make it 27. So that's fine. You can observe in a longer period. It's more like a Secret Service type of activity rather than a sentinel type of activity, if you like the metaphor. Before coming back to slides, what we have seen so far is to deal with the threat prevention part. But as I said at the beginning, we are more than just that. We can also collect these signals to provide recommendations. So let me move into a different part of the product, which generates signals that you have seen super simplified in the original email, the day in the life of a line manager. So if you click on the recommendation part, there is a bunch of fancy stuff that all belongs to clustering users based on attributes, behaviors, and it's all very nice. But the meaty part here is really to understand who are the users that are, as we say, very incompliant, analyzing the should-be state versus the as-is. And we come up with a score that is not a security score, it's a different score. We call it incompliance. And the goal is about to highlight users where any given line manager should start doing things about adding, removing, reviewing access. Again, you dive into that. I mean, for the folks loving pure clustering analysis, we have a bunch of stuff built around that, okay? Because the way we build these scores are also using peer clustering techniques. But if you really boil it down to the real important part, it's the system is able to provide recommendations that we pre-digested into simplified recommendations that are in the revoke, review, keep space. So let me explain this first one. The system says, hey, dear line manager, using this information, we suggest you revoke this access because this Rosario guy has never used this access to this homegrown application number 1, but also most of his peers are not using it. So it really seems that there's been a massive wrong provisioning to the wrong guys. The second one is different, says review, because he's not using it, but most of his YAM peers are using it. And peers, YAM means peers sitting in the identity governance platform we might receive data from, and so forth. So the goal of this part of the product, again, same engine, just 2 different use cases, it's to provide recommendation following these lines of is using or not using, and also based on what the peers are doing, that's what we suggest. So that's in a nutshell what you have seen very quickly. It's the foundational thinking of the Sherlock platform that, again, let me repeat it, This UI, it's managed by few people. A lot of the signals that we generate are consumed elsewhere. So let me get into a simple example on what that looks like. So first of all, a bit of a directional statement. All these information that we provide are and will be incorporated into the predominant identity governance platforms. In other words, we want to funnel, encapsulate, embed these signals into the leading IAM platform in the market, including our previous Kairos IDS IBM One. So it's important to have a look at what it looks like. And that's an example taken from One Identity. So any given manager gets into the system, and among the other things that he has to do, he is now focusing on ability to observe threats. You remember, that's a signal coming out of Sherlock, and also recommendations that are here funneled or encapsulated into policy violations. So it's not here today, we run a different webinar for that, but it's really information which is built for purpose into any IGA system. The integration varies because the integration paradigm that for each for One Identity versus SailPoint is different, but this is to give you a flavor that the place where this information is consumed. Now we are moving towards conclusion, and then we open up to any quick Q&A that you might have. So we think that the message is all about, if you remember Ronald Reagan, he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. So we think it's time for security and identity management to join forces. And that join of forces is not, it's by definition speaking a language without barrier. So it's key that any message coming out of the security is something that has to be understood by business manager. And this behavioral message of that guy has done something strange on that, and that, it's the only language that a manager understands. So we think that as Sherlock, of course, we don't want to sound arrogant. We are not the only one in this phase, but our goal is really to be the lingua franca between these two words. The security word that maybe has collected gazillions of logs that we could reuse for finding behavioral baselines, and the word of IGA of identity that has no clue about behavioral insights. So we are sitting in between, and we think to have a bit of a credibility because we come from an identity space. So we know how to try to intermediate this message in a meaningful way.